Hey guys, what's going on? So we have a lot to go over. I'm probably going to be breaking this up into a couple of parts, either 2 or 3 parts. So the patch dropped, we're going to quickly go over all of the other things besides the changes. The costumes, first of all, I'm not going to go too in depth on those since we have a lot to cover. New costumes, overall impressions is that they're quite nice, quite cool, but I'm not going to say anything else about that. Really like Nyx's as well. The spectate mode on Arena seems interesting. It's a little bit more complicated than I originally thought. There's going to be a chat box, so it's going to be more similar to like live streaming. So you have the chat box over there, you can ban people that are being obnoxious or whatever. You can invite your friends or guild members to watch you. So it's a neat little thing there. I'm probably not going to mess with it too much, at least not for now. League of Honor did in fact go to 6 hours from 6 to midnight, which is good. It gives a lot more opening time for people to play it. The Transcendence points rework was a bit of a shock. It took me like an hour to reset everyone's perks, but it is pretty interesting. So you don't really get too much of an advantage until you hit T5, because then you are actually able to get one of each perk. So if we were to consider Transcend 3 and 4 as separate perks, then you can still get all of them, but an extra T1 perk as well. So you could have attack and HP. And have your DPS a little bit more survivable as well. And there's also so much more versatility in it. So you could, for example, get attack, HP, and then one of each perk for each skill in the Transcend 3 section. And so if they don't have very interesting T5 perks, it doesn't matter because you can still use those points anywhere else. So Cassandra, for example, I might get her to T5 even though I'm not interested in either of her T5 perks, just so I can use those points on one of her skills, you see. So that's pretty interesting like that. There's been several changes to common for all heroes type perks, so T1 and T2. So T1 was obviously changed for everyone since it is the same for everyone. Instead of having separate P defense and M defense options, we now have one just defense up, and that's by 35%. So it might actually compete with the HP option now because it is overall more defense, and since it's both M and P defense, it's more universal than just one or the other. And with that extra slot freed up by combining those two, we also have a crit resist up option as well for 200. So another somewhat big change is that before, some T2 perks couldn't be stacked, like the crit chance boost from Priest, etc. But it's not that big of a deal even after the patch, because you only get like 50 crit instead of 150 when it's stacked. So it's still not worth stacking unless you have no other choice. But with this Transcendence perk revamp, you will probably almost always have a choice to not go for that when you know you'll have a Priest with that perk already. So in most cases, you're probably still not going to want to stack them just because how bad the diminishing returns are. And there's also a theme throughout a lot of these perks, similar to the fact that P and M defense got combined into one. It's looking like that with other things too, like one of Knight's T2 perks, magic block rate, is being changed to just block rate. It's reduced by 100, but that includes physical block as well. Warrior's Warlike perk got nerfed pretty hard actually, from 10 to 7, and also the CC resistance also got knocked down 30 points. So it's not a huge deal, but you definitely will notice something. Like in Arena, for example, 40% attack when there's those 4 enemies on the field versus 28% attack. That sounds like a much bigger difference. And again here, it was M dodge and now it's just dodge, so that includes physical dodge. Assassin's got a completely different T2 perk from Hidden Dagger to Swift and Nimble. It doesn't seem that great because it doesn't seem like it'll proc that often, and it's per every second, not per every time you're attacked. So I don't know how useful that would be in most situations, because then you just dodge one hit and then, you know, it has to stack back up. So maybe if you already had a very high dodge and you just need that little bit more to eventually dodge more often, then it could be helpful. And these two perks are pretty interesting as well. So Vengeful Curse for the Priest and Deception for the Wizard, they both have a 40-second cooldown. So Deception is when you're hit by an enemy, you're immune to the next hit of damage. And Vengeful Curse is the attacker's damage is reduced by 70% for 3 seconds. So this perk for the Priest, I can imagine, might be good to counter Epises in Arena, because Epis will always go back there to the Priest and attack her, and if she can't one-shot her with her S2, which I guess she can't, then her damage will be reduced by 70%, thus giving you those 3 seconds, hopefully enough to kill her before she gets her power back. Priest also got the Blessing of Mana, perk, so that's pretty interesting. And yeah, there are a few other things sprinkled in here, but you'll see those yourself when you're playing. One last thing is that the T5 perk got buffed. It's now attack, defense, and HP plus 15 instead of 10. So it's definitely more an option now than dark if the dark isn't very good. Then again, you can also spend those points anywhere else now. And now we get to the meat of the patch note, the hero balance patch. A lot of them are changed a lot. A lot of them aren't changed very much. So we're just going to go ahead and start with knights. Claws didn't get changed very much, although I do like his little change here. I never even considered this perk, considering it was just a 50% chance and I didn't want to have that RNG there. But now that's 100% chance, drawing them all in might be good for certain team comps. If you have like some small AoEs like a Luna or something, that might be very interesting, because I know that range is quite decent. Some of the wording in here is a little bit confusing, like moving on to Demia, it says skill cooldown is reduced by 11 seconds, previous 9 seconds. So if I were to use a little bit of logic, it would actually seem like it's getting increased to 11 seconds from 9 seconds. So basically it's going to have a 2-second longer cooldown. Looks like her third skill is getting a pretty big nerf actually, because the blocking all P damage effect will be removed. It's just gone, just like bye. And the stun duration is getting heavily nerfed as well to 0.7 seconds from 2 seconds. And its cooldown is getting increased by 2 seconds. So I still don't have Demia. Will be interesting to see how much the P damage blocking effect and the reduced stun will affect her in arena. And I fight them enough, so I guess we'll see. But then again, all my heroes got changed as well. So right now everything is completely just all over the place. It's going to take a while to figure everything out again. And one of her Transcendence perks got reworked as well, which in my opinion is actually somewhat of a buff. Because before, not only did it cost an additional mana, but she took 30% of the damage dealt to allies while the skill is in effect, and now it's just while casting, all allies take 20% reduced P damage. So yes, it's only 20% instead of 30%, but she's not going to be taking any damage for that. It's just straight P damage reduction, and also apparently it won't cost that extra mana, so if you decide to go for that perk. For Jane, we're seeing the same change we saw happen to Claws, where she'll get that 100% chance to draw them in instead of 50%. For her, I'm not too sure if it's really all that great, because I don't think the range of her first skill is very big, and so if it would actually draw anyone in, and her Coffin Jane strategy is getting nerfed a little bit, because that'll have a second of stun taken off of it. Ricardo just got a tiny change to one of his Transcendence perks. Instead of healing allies, the mana cost will be reduced on his skill 3, Transcendence 3, so not a huge deal there since it is just a Transcendence perk and not a skill revamp. Sonia got completely changed, like really crazily changed, but that's to be expected since she's a new hero. Starting with the skill revamps, her skill 2 used to consume HP when using it, now that doesn't anymore. That's just erased, so she won't lose any HP. Also a buff to the activation chance of auto-attacking while that skill is active, 30% to 20%, so another buff there. And a pretty massive buff to her passive as well. So since electricity can be stacked up to 30 times, it's now a 30% im damage increase instead of 15 like it was before. And when the enemies are shocked, the im damage they receive is also increased by 10%. And then we have several Transcendence perk revamps as well. Instead of her getting an attack speed boost, she will apply additional damage to all enemies, giving her some AoE it looks like. Her electric explosion, so her third skill, just got completely changed. It's like from one thing straight to the other. The stun duration is getting increased by a second. Before it was recovers 1% of max HP every time damage is dealt to an enemy, and depending on how fast she can be dealing damage, that might be actually enough to self-sustain her. I mean, I don't have Sonia, but as far as I've heard, she can be a sort of sub DPS, so maybe still lifesteal would be enough to have her be a self-sustaining tank. And her passive, Shock, also had one of its Transcendence perks revamped, which is kind of funny because this one had to be changed because it does already have 40% im damage just because of the buff that it had in its normal skill. So that would be completely useless now, and now that's just changed to the shock duration and being increased by 2 seconds. Also, it looks like her unique weapon got a straight buff. Not too much else to say there. So that's pretty much it for Sonia. We're probably just going to do warriors and then wrap it up there. And then I'll do the other 5 classes since we were also talking about the other parts of the patch as well. So it's probably getting somewhat long already. So Gao's getting a slight nerf to his vortex. Just the gathering effect is cut in half. The CC bar reduction stays the same, and that's the most important thing. That just might affect you a little bit in arena, and that's pretty much it. But even so, I never noticed that the gathering was that effective anyway. It just kind of felt like it more moved them around than actually gathered them in a clump. But what might make a difference, especially in arena, is that his passive skill is getting a pretty big nerf, 33% less attack boost. But it actually seems like most meta arena units are getting nerfed, so it's kind of to be expected. It looks like Nyla's really getting some love though. Straight 35% damage increase on her first skill. The attack boost on her second skill is getting buffed by 50%. Her second skill is a party-wide buff, so that would actually help your entire team there. And her fourth skill is getting a damage increase of 300%. This is a skill where every 5th auto attack she has a now 40% chance to deal additional damage, and that additional damage is getting buffed quite a lot. She also got some Transcendence perk revamps. This one, if there's one enemy, damage is increased by 100, so might make her better for some world bosses, some guild raids. So her other Transcendence perk for her first skill is just getting a straight buff. It's the same effect, but without the added mana cost. And I'm a little bit confused on the Tornado Strike. So this is her passive again, the one that now has a 40% activation chance. It says previous activation chance changes to 10%, maybe it meant 10% more to give her what she now has normally, and now it'll be changed to 60%. So having this perk, with the fact that the damage is increased by 300%, might make her a pretty good auto attacker as well. Just give her a lot of attack speed and I guess dodge, she needs dodge. So at first glance, Viscus is pretty straightforward, but it's actually a little bit different than it seems. So on skill 1, it reads, if used while holding 3 or more stacks of souls, shackles the enemy for 3 seconds. And this Transcendence perk, if you choose to take it, will now not require her having those souls. But skill 2 is a little bit misleading because she doesn't have any shackle effect on her skill 2. It's actually an IM-def reduction of 30 extra % if she's holding 3 or more stacks, and the condition for needing those souls is taken off if you choose to go for this Transcendence perk. So it might be good for faster battles like Arena, where she may not have time to get those souls, because I'm pretty sure the way Visca gets souls is by using skills on enemies, not just attacks, so she has to use skills, and of course without these Transcendence perks they won't have those added bonuses on there like the shackle or the IM-def reduction. I honestly can't really comment on Theo's change because I don't have him. I don't know what his Transcendence 5 perk was before, and what they mean with half mana, if they mean 3 mana orbs, or if they mean like half of a mana orb, or I can't comment if that's a buff, nerf, or just a change, but since it says new here instead of changed, I assume it's an added effect and not taking away from anything. But then the way they word it, it says recovers half mana instead, so instead of what? I don't know. And of course, Scarlett, we all knew this was coming. She's getting crushed quite a bit. It looks like they're more leaning to make her a sort of sub DPS and not a tank, because her first skill, damage is increased by 20%, and apparently it'll heal all allies HP by 30% of damage dealt, and the area of effect is increased by 10%. But when I'm looking at her skill in the game, it doesn't say anything about recovering allies HP, but I could check that real quick. Gonna take Philop's defensive gear off and see what we can find. Alright, Philop has a little bit of damage on him, and he has no lifesteal, so we can see. It didn't look like that healed him any. Try again. No, like you would at least see a pixel or something go up, even if it's not very much. So I think it's really only herself that gets healed here. And her skill 2 is just getting torn apart compared to what it was before. So not only is the mana cost getting increased to 2 orbs, they'll also be removing the mana burn, so the enemies won't lose any mana when you're doing S2, and they're also removing the CC immunity while and after casting. That's the worst part in my opinion, not to mention they're cutting the stun duration in half to 1.5 seconds instead of 3. Like, I think they went a little bit hard on her. Just removing the CC immunity and having it be interruptible, I think would have been enough. Not also completely making this bullcrap. 1.5 seconds. Oh, but at least they increased the damage because we know it does so much damage. I mean, it might do a little bit of damage. All of her skills got a damage buff, so they're definitely trying to gear her more towards a sub DPS and less of a tank, because she was being used as a tank in my team and a lot of other people's teams. Like, if you're going to build her DPS, I don't know if she's going to really be able to survive as a tank. They even took away the 15% less damage for 10 seconds perk, which is probably what I would have taken in this case, but not anymore. Because now if you use your Transcendence points on taking this one, it's just back to the way it was before with no perks at all. I mean, yeah, she was a little overpowered and everyone had Scarlett up in Challenger and even most of Master. I don't think even half of the people that have her now would have gotten her if this is what she was. So in situations like this, it kind of hurts a little bit because it's like, I don't know how viable she's going to be anymore. She can still remove the positive buffs, I suppose, but so can a lot of others. So I don't know. I think Leo is probably better by now. I know she was a little bit too strong, but not so strong that they needed to completely crush her S2 into oblivion pretty much. But yeah, I guess that'll do it for this video. I've been recording here for 50 minutes, trying to get all my thoughts out. I'm probably going to cut out most of it, just try and keep it concise and simple. But yeah, that'll do it for now. Tell me what you think about the changes to tanks and warriors. Of course, the one that affects me the most is obviously Scarlet because of how big the nerf was. None of the others in the list I either have or use very often. So personally, the only one I can really relate to is Scarlet here, and yeah, it's pretty bad. I just still can't get over the fact that they also removed the CC immunity. It kind of sucks, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. Leaving a like would be greatly appreciated if you did happen to enjoy. Thanks, as always, for watching, and until next time.